Welcome to Junior Achievement. My name is Risa, and on behalf of JA, thank you for committing the time to teach students about work readiness, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy. Today we are going to explore the program JA Economics for Success. What you'll notice is that there are two volunteer and teacher guidebooks in your curriculum packet. One is for you and one is for you to give to the classroom teacher. What you'll notice is that the opening pages are greetings from JA USA, as well as some teaching tips on how best to work with middle school students. You will then find that there is a master list of materials, and this will help you to identify what materials go with what activity and to ensure that you have received all the materials that you are supposed to have. Then you will notice that every session is set up in a similar fashion. There's always an overview and an objective to help you really pinpoint what the students are supposed to get out of the time that you're in the classroom. There's a preparation checklist to make sure that you're ready to go before you get to the school, and there's a recommended time. For this program, they recommend 45 minutes. There's also a material section specific to the activity so that you can ensure that you have everything you need for today's activity. The presentation is outlined in three ways. You start with an introduction, then you go into the actual activity, and then there's always a summary and review. One thing you'll note is that on the side margins there are a lot of presentation tips, answer keys, and as well as glossary terms. At the very end of each activity, you'll notice there is an extended learning opportunity section, and this is above and beyond the actual activity. It's something your teacher might want to do in between your visits, or there might be something on there that you want to challenge the students to do in between your visits as well. Let's take a look at session 1. Session 1 is called Mirror, Mirror, and the materials that you need for today's session is the table tent. And the first time I have the volunteers fill out the table tent with their names, I always have them put their name on both the front and the back. This will allow you to see their name as you're milling around the classroom. You will also need the self-knowledge take-home newsletters, as well as the post-it flags. This activity is challenging the students to think all about how their self-knowledge of skills, interests, and values come together to create an opportunity in their futures to have a job or a career that they love. We really want to get the students to think about the choices they make today and the things that they are doing regarding their self-knowledge is going to hopefully link to a successful career in the future. What you'll notice is that there is a suggested introduction in the guidebook, and it walks you through the opportunity to just talk a little bit about yourself. We encourage you to take the first few minutes of this session to talk about who you are. Where have you gotten and how did you get there? Maybe throw in a connection that you have of what you can remember about your time in middle school. That will help you connect to their level. The next thing it talks you through is to go through these talking points to challenge the students to tell you a little bit about themselves, to talk about what they do well and what they're most proud of, and what are some of the words and the characteristics that would describe them. One thing I did was I had all the students, as they were filling out their name tents, to think about 3 words that they think best describe them and to write it on the inside of their table tent. This allowed all the students to engage in the activity, and then after everyone got their name tents completed, I had just a few of them share some of those key words with me and the whole group, which led into the next part of the discussion, which is to think about the choices we make and how those choices link to who we are and the brand that we are building for ourselves. The next little mini icebreaker is called You Choose, and it's just a simple activity to get the students to think about some of the choices we make every day. We make simple choices, and then in our futures, and even as middle schoolers, sometimes they have to make choices that have greater consequences and that are a little bit more challenging. The book suggests that you have the students give you a thumbs up if they would choose one or the other. A way to make it just a little bit more interactive is to have the students stand if they would choose Reese's Pieces, or to stay sitting if they choose M&Ms. And that way the students have a little bit more movement and are a little bit more interactive with the activity. So you're going to just throw out these random choices, have the students share what they would do, which one they would choose, And you'll notice that that is just a great way to link them to thinking about the choices that we make and how the choices we make today are going to lead to our futures. And that's when you can start the conversation about self-knowledge, and you can do that by handing out the self-knowledge take-home newsletters. You'll notice there's this large triangle on the bottom, and it really outlines the 3 tips. One of skills, and I always like to emphasize that those are things that we're good at, interests, things that we like, and values, things that are really important to us or things that we believe in. And what we want to talk to the students about, and you'll notice that there are some talking tips throughout this portion of the activity that lead you in this discussion. But it's important to get the students to think about what makes them who they are. It talks a little bit about talking about brand and identity. And one thing I like to do is to challenge the students to think about brands they're very familiar with. And I do this by having the students stand up if they have a brand or a logo on their shirt. And then I use those brands that are in the classroom to talk to the students about what do they know about the brand, what is that brand known for, and how have they built that brand identity to us. What I found was that a lot of times there's a brand that maybe some people love and maybe there's another one that people aren't so fond of. For example, we had a football team in the room, and of course with that there comes lots of competition. So some people loved the team and others really didn't like it. And I was able to use that as a conversation about building a brand and how sometimes we build positive brands with people and sometimes we might have a negative connotation with people. And I simply ask the students to consider when a teacher thinks about your name, or when a parent or a friend's parent or a peer of theirs thinks about their name, what do they think about? What would the first few words come to mind? Just like we had thrown out a few words about each of the brands in the room, what would those people think about that student? And I challenge the students to think about how our choices and have consequences, and that even if maybe we have a negative brand with someone, we can always make better choices tomorrow to help make that brand more positive. So jump into the actual activity where the students get to explore more of their skills, interests, and values. And they can do that on page 2 of this take-home newsletter. You'll notice there's a section for them to brainstorm their top skills, interest, and then there's a values checklist. One thing I would make sure that you tell the students is that it's okay not to have all of these values as a check mark of yes. We are all different, and even if I as the volunteer or as the classroom teacher, even we wouldn't have a yes to all of those values. So it's not that it's good or bad if they check those, it's just being honest with yourself about what's most important to you. Again, throughout this, I would allow a few opportunities for the students to share some of their thinking. And one thing I like to do is I like to ask the classroom students who has a skill that's also one of their top interests. And usually there's a few of them. And I always talk about how great it is when you have the opportunity to be good at what you really love to do. Then I ask if there's any students that have an interest that maybe doesn't have a place in their top skills. And I use that as an opportunity to talk about how oftentimes we really like to do something, and it's okay if we're not the best at it. That's why we practice things. That's why we continue to go to school to get more education. That's why it's always great to ask questions and find places in which we can get more mentorship or more knowledge about those things that we really like to do. The next portion of the activity is really launching into the world of work, and it's using this large poster that we have with the materials, and it's talking to the students how oftentimes we can lump jobs into career clusters. So again, if you have an interest in a specific area, a lot of times if you go to school for that, if you gain interest in that area, there are a lot of jobs that you can do underneath that umbrella. And that is what this poster is really trying to show us. So what you'll notice is that there are the 16 different career clusters, and these are also outlined in your guidebook as well as in the student newsletter. And what you'll notice is that it gives you the title and then a variety of the jobs that fall under it. And the guidebook asks you to challenge the students to think about one more job that they could add to this list. Now just know this is actually kind of a challenging task. I found that my 6th grade students who I was working with found this very, very difficult, and oftentimes they would come up with a job that would really be better suited under a different career cluster. So keep that in mind, that you might need to help the students through it, and or consider altering that task by just simply having the students look at the different jobs and maybe circle the one that most interests them and have them underline the one that they don't know very much about. This way, they're still exploring the jobs, they're still exploring the career clusters, but they don't have the frustration level of trying to have to think about one more thing. One additional note for the volunteer is that in the back of your book, in the appendix, there is a whole section that gives you a little bit more information about these clusters, as well as the definition. So these are this is a resource for you as the volunteer, but that would be a good thing to take a look at before you go into the classroom so you can better talk about some of these clusters. One other thing to note, you can hold this as a large group discussion, kind of going through each of the 16 clusters, or what you might want to consider doing is splitting the students into small groups or pairs and assigning them each 1 or 2 of the clusters to focus on. Students in middle school can get very overwhelmed by a whole sheet of information, and so breaking that down and having them focus on just 1 or 2 might be beneficial. And then what you can do is you can have each of the groups share one interesting thing they found about all of the clusters, and that way they're still hearing just a little bit about all the clusters, and they can also take this home for further exploration. The last portion of today's activity is to challenge the students to put everything that they've learned today, their self-knowledge as well as the different career opportunities, together, and to have them think about what might they like to do when they grow up. Challenge them to think about the careers they've been talking about and which one might be interesting to them. There are the Post-it note flags in your kit that you can distribute one to each of the students. Have them write their initials on it and have them write a potential career that they might like to do. And then you can have them come up to the front of the room and actually place this on the poster wherever their job would fall. Now, depending upon the time that you have at this point in the activity, you might not have time for every student to come up and individually share their job, so you might need to assign them to come up in rows, or as they complete the task to come up and place their flag on the poster. The other thing to note is that sometimes careers might not be on here already, and they might struggle with knowing where exactly to put that flag. You as the volunteer, as well as engaging the classroom teacher, might need to be ready to help them with that. One time I couldn't figure out where it would fall on the poster, and so I just brainstormed with them and said, you know what, that's a great question. I think maybe it would fall in here. Let's put it on the edge of the poster in this area, and that's something that we can look at in the future. So don't let it be a point of frustration for the students. There is a mini summary and review where you can just make sure to recap the highlights of the activity, and then you can let the students know the next time you'll be coming in and how we're going to take this one step further in thinking about our future careers and how they might link to education. Enjoy session 1!